Hey everyone, welcome to another G News update. Well, hold your horses about the word confidence, because there can be no confidence when Trump's administration at the moment is interfering and putting a pressure campaign on the US Federal Reserve. The effect of this kind of interference, political interference with the independent central banking system, particularly of the reserve currency for the world, which is the US dollar, is that there are large economic ripples, and this can affect things like inflation and interest rates. And it's pretty good that the New Zealand governor of the Reserve Bank made a stand with her colleagues in the name of keeping the monetary system independent. And I think that's a much bigger issue for us all. But it highlights the fact that business confidence that's being boasted about by the National Party, which is all old news, it's all based on data from December last year, last quarter, is basically out of date already. And that when the National Party talks about growth and aggregate GDP growth being on the mend, we've turned a corner, everything's going to be good in the election, back us, stay with us for another 3 years, we're confident, we're growing the economy, it was the year of growth last year, etc. Well, there should be no confidence in any of that, because just look at the uncertainty around a situation like this one, where there's a criminal investigation into the Federal Reserve launched by the Trump administration, which is just upsetting the apple cart, and no one can be too certain what the heck is going to happen tomorrow. In other news that is similar, there was a meeting today in Greenland with J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio attending a meeting with the Danish Foreign Minister, and they had a kind of get-together where Denmark basically made some proposals to try and assuage concerns about security, but they ended up agreeing to disagree. And there's going to be a working group set up in about 3 weeks' time that's going to be looking at the security concerns of the United States and Denmark's red lines or bottom lines when it comes to things like sovereignty. There's quite a bit of talk. Trump made some remarks the other day about how Denmark and Greenland couldn't fend off itself, and believed that the updates and proposals to the military defence presence from Denmark amounted to a couple more dog sleds. Now, it is true that there's been dog sleds that run up and down about a 5,000-mile path around Greenland, and there has been an expansion in this area. But it is also true that there's been an acquisition proposal for something like 16 new fighter jets, 4 or 5 new vessels, naval vessels, all sorts of drones, and all sorts of beefing up when it comes to military presence. There's also been an offer by the Danish to allow the existing US military base in the north of Greenland to expand as much as they like. Now, it turns out that the USA has actually been withdrawing its military presence. Something like 99% of all the troops that were there way back in the 1950s or so have now been withdrawn, while the opposite is the case from Denmark. They've been building up. So it's a bit hard to fathom what the rational concerns are here for the Trump administration, and that working group is supposed to set that all in motion. But you can see the frustration dealing with Trump. Nothing's clear and nothing could be agreed. So Denmark's been very, very reasonable. And again, they just will walk out saying, well, look, we agreed to disagree. In other news, we've got Christopher Bishop out there today, kind of making a big reappearance after goofing off for most of the summer. He had delayed the RMA by 2 years, as you know, which set us all backwards, and it's been kind of like a bit of a glory show so that he can take the credit now in election year. And one of the initiatives that he's attaching that RMA kind of spin to today was that those 70 square metre granny flats, today's the day when builders can start building that, which means that there's an exemption for a resource consent as long as it's a single story, simple open design. You've got the sort of the tick from a master builder there. So there was a whole lot of promo and hyping by Bishop, which amounts to a lot of self-praise, but really he'd slowed down the RMA reform there that we really needed by about 2 years so he could sort of grandstand now. And I think there's some speculation that maybe Bishop is trying to kind of build up a perception in the public, which is quite wrong, that he's some kind of future Prime Minister material. Look at all the work he's doing, look at this great work in the RMA and the fast tracking. But of course, it's all been anti-democratic, it's all been trotting over the correct processes. There's also been concern about stacking these panels without proper oversight. And it's the usual kind of deregulatory, the loose, fast and loose corporate kind of takeover, I think, that we, could probably match up with Trump and Trump's administration as they rip apart regulations. Now, speaking of poor regulations and self-serving soft regulations, turns out there was an article today that was concerning the fact that Manage My Health had been advised by a security analyst 2 years ago about these very concerns about its data security, and it did very little. In fact, it did nothing. It was repeatedly brought to Manage My Health's attention. There was an escalation process even that went about saying, look, you need to fill these vulnerabilities, but of course they didn't. And there was speculation and opinion that maybe they had some commercial reasons not to change and maintain a great big list of customers, paying for storage of all these records on an ongoing basis. So this came back down to something Professor Jane Kelsey had written extensively about with classical neoliberals and the neoliberal paradigm that we're all living in here. And that is that these National Party and ACT Party tend to have this kind of like deregulation kind of agenda when it comes to neoliberalism, and that means self-regulation. So the soft self-regulation is at the heart of these big data leaks that we've seen recently. There's been absolutely no oversight from Health New Zealand because all it does is publish a kind of a big document that says, here's our security standards, we expect you to follow them, but there's no oversight. So this has been something that Simeon Brown could have fixed if he was really fixing the basics, but he didn't. He didn't fix anything. It was kind of like probably that mindset where you sit back and say, hey, deregulation, we're cutting red tape, we're cutting more red tape, and just sort of being a bit of an idiot, a shallow idiot really about regulation and what's best. So now with this big scare and all the public backlash, we might see Simeon Brown and the National Party actually do something about changing the law here and tightening up these levels of oversight that Health New Zealand should actually have. Invest some money, stop trying to cut things, all the time. So that was that. Then there was also the interesting story about how, depending on which data set you use, violent crime in New Zealand is either up 7% or it's down 21%. And this is highlighting the fact that Christopher Luxon tells a story where he uses one data set to say that violent crime went up under Labor by a huge amount and it came down under National by using another set of data. And so that's dodgy and everyone can see the dodginess, but it's the one area, I guess, that the National Party still has the most public confidence in, that they're going to be the harshest and horriblest on criminals. So out of all the polling around Ipsos, that was about the one area. Labor, as you know, leads on the cost of living. People have much more faith in Labor when it comes to running the economy now. There's a huge amount of confidence that Labor will fix the health system. There's more confidence in the Greens when it comes to climate change than for any other party. But when it comes to unemployment, it's with Labor. So law and order is the only area that National were kind of holding on to a kind of a thin lead over Labor. So it's kind of, those are the kind of data really that you sort of see underneath. People are kind of fed up with the kind of bogus data that the National Party are using to try and sell themselves as restoring law and order. What else has been happening? Well, there's been this case of the All Black coach moving on, and this has come after a big review at the midpoint between World Cups. The chair of New Zealand Rugby, David Kirk, kind of made some announcements today about how the trajectory of the rugby union wasn't, where we wanted to go, and so Razor has left the building and left the role of being coach of the All Blacks. I think the record there was something like 20 wins to 7 losses, so it wasn't too bad. But there was a lot of talk online about this, and some people said there was too much hype about him, that there was a difference between the national level success and the politics of international rugby. But anyway, I mean, the guy could spin on his head. Not many people can do that. And it all seems a bit crap what New Zealanders do, and the politics of the rugby union itself. So I don't know anymore. I probably used to be quite a fan of rugby in New Zealand. I don't know about you, but it's become less important as it's become professional. So the Labour Party has actually seized on the fact that there's been a record number of liquidations as the business community experienced, I think, the highest number of business closures in 15 years under Christopher Luxon's watch. That was a shocker, wasn't it? Because they came in to fix the economy. They promised everyone in the last election, trust us, we wouldn't lie to you in an election year. We will turn things around. And what happened? Well, a record number of businesses closed. It was something like, I don't know what it was anymore, 8 or something, huge. And so that's under Christopher Luxon's watch. That's on him. So then there was also the story about Labour and a levy that could be applied. And I think Labour want to apply a levy to streamers of entertainment content. This would be used to fund local productions, and it comes on the heels of all of those local productions and national identity, etc., and cultural value that was wiped out when all of the revenue base disappeared as the advertising model just collapsed. And we all started watching Netflix and Discovery and Amazon Prime, etc., and Disney Plus. And so this idea of a levy, rather than having sort of corporates running around completely unregulated and untaxed, has some favour for people, because it will mean that there's probably going to be an element of more local productions, and that would return some funding and be a kind of a fair balance. Of course, the ACT Party ideologically is opposed to that and wants a complete corporate takeover here. So they made up this cool story that somehow or another all of those streamers would add any kind of levy or tax onto the cost of your bills, and they went out in public trying to peddle their own fake news. In America, Congressman Robin Kelly has actually lodged 3 articles of impeachment against Kristi Noem, and this kind of comes about because of ICE and the federal invasion and basically horrors that we're seeing there. So there is an impeachment process underway. I think I'll just leave it there. There's this final piece of news here from New Zealand over on Waiheke Island. Here's a picture of a Tesla, and if you look at the what's written there, it says, yeah, sure, okay, but this is before I bought this, before I knew he was such a prick. And so that was pretty funny. So that's all I have to say. That was a quick update, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, and talk to you all again soon.
Welcome to G News, the good news.